All right, ready to dive into macronutrients.
Mm.
I feel like this is something so many of us struggle with, carbs, proteins, fats. It's like a nutritional maze out there with all the diets and advice swirling around.
It definitely can be. There's just so much information, it's hard to know what to actually do.
Exactly. So we're going to use this mini lecture we have to kind of break it all down, cut through the noise, hopefully give everyone some solid knowledge about these macronutrients.
That's like a plan. I like that, cutting through the noise. That's what we need.
For sure. Okay, so first things first. What are macronutrients? Like, what are we even talking about here?
Well, basically, they're those nutrients that our bodies need in large amounts to function.
Makes sense. So, I know we need vitamins and minerals,
Mm-hmm.
but we need these carbs, proteins, and fats in much bigger amounts, right?
Exactly. They're like the main fuel for our cells. It's kind of interesting. Each gram of carbs and protein has 4 calories, but fat has 9.
9. Wow. Okay, so fat is like the energy powerhouse then.
Which is why it's so important to understand the different types of fat and how they affect us. But let's maybe start with carbs. I feel like they get such a bad rap these days.
Yeah, for sure. It's like everyone's saying carbs are evil, but then I hear they're actually important for our bodies.
Well, they are important, but it's more nuanced than that. Carbs are actually the body's preferred source of energy, especially for your brain and muscles. It's just like you have to understand the different types.
Oh, okay. So not all carbs are created equal.
Nope, not at all. Think of it this way. Complex carbs, like the ones you get from whole grains, legumes, and veggies, they're like a slow-burning fire providing sustained energy. Simple carbs, on the other hand. Think processed foods, sugary drinks. Those are like a quick burst of energy, and then you crash.
Okay, so it's like choosing between a steady campfire and a fleeting firework.
Got it. I like that. And we can't forget about fiber. That's a type of carb, too.
Oh, right. Fiber. I always forget about that one. It's a carb, but doesn't actually provide calories. So what's the deal with fiber? What's it good for?
Well, it's super important for your gut. It's kind of like it sweeps through your intestines, keeping everything moving smoothly.
Okay, yeah, that's what I always thought of it as. Just for regularity.
It helps with that, but it also does way more. It can help regulate blood sugar, lower cholesterol, and it even feeds the good bacteria in your gut.
Wow. Okay, fiber is officially way more important than I realized.
It's a powerhouse. Okay, let's move on to protein. That one's a biggie.
Yeah, protein. I know it helps build muscle, but I'm not really sure what else it does.
So protein is involved in pretty much every process in your body. Building and repairing tissue, boosting your immune system, even making enzymes and hormones.
Wow, that's a lot. So it's not just for gym rats then?
Nope, not at all. And here's where it gets a little more complex. Proteins are made up of things called amino acids.
Okay.
And some of these amino acids your body can make on its own, but others you have to get from food. Those are called essential amino acids.
Ah, okay. I've heard of those. I think I've also heard the term complete protein. Does that relate to this?
It does. Animal sources of protein like meat, fish, eggs, they usually have all 9 essential amino acids, so they're complete. Plant-based proteins, though, they might be missing 1 or more.
So if you're vegetarian or vegan, you have to be a little more careful about combining different protein sources.
Exactly. Like beans and rice together is a classic example. That way you get all those essential amino acids.
Cool. Okay, I think we have carbs and proteins down. Now for the big one, fat.
Ah, yes. Fat, the one everyone loves to hate. But really, healthy fats are actually crucial for so many things, like your hormones, your brain, even your cells.
Wait, so fat isn't actually the enemy. I feel like I've been told my whole life to avoid it at all costs.
I know, right? It's kind of like carbs, though. There are good fats, not so good fats, and the ones that are definitely bad for you.
Okay, so let's break it down then. What kind of fats are we talking about here?
So unsaturated fats are the good guys. Those are the ones you find in things like avocados, nuts and seeds, olive oil, and fatty fish like salmon. They're good for your heart and can even help lower bad cholesterol.
Okay, those sound pretty good. What about the not-so-good ones?
Those would be saturated fats. You find them in animal products like meat and dairy, and also some tropical oils like coconut oil. For a long time, people thought saturated fat was a major cause of heart disease.
Yeah, I remember hearing that.
Well, recent research has kind of changed that view. It seems like the relationship between saturated fat and heart health is actually more complicated than we thought.
Oh, so it's not as simple as just saturated fat is bad.
Nope. Scientists are still figuring it all out, but the general advice is to consume it in moderation.
Moderation, that seems to be a theme in all this.
It really does. Okay, are you ready to talk about the really bad fats?
Uh-oh. This sounds scary.
Those are the trans fats. They're basically artificially created fats that are in a lot of processed foods and fried stuff, and those are the ones you really want to avoid as much as possible.
Okay, trans fats, got it. Noted. So we've talked about all these different fats. How much should we be eating? Like, is there some magic formula or something?
That's a good question, but there isn't really a one-size-fits-all answer. It really depends on a bunch of things, like how active you are, your age, your metabolism, and what your goals are, like if you're trying to lose weight or gain muscle or just be healthy overall.
Okay, so those charts you see everywhere that say, like, 40% carbs, 30% protein, 30% fat, those aren't really accurate then.
They can be a good starting point, but they're not personalized. Remember, we were talking about how this source material really emphasizes individual needs.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like trying to make everyone wear the same size shoe. It's just not going to work.
Hmm.
So how do we figure out what works best for us individually?
Well, the best thing you can do is really pay attention to your body and how different foods make you feel.
Oh, like, if I eat this, do I feel good? Or if I eat that, do I feel bad?
Exactly. Do you feel energized after a meal or sluggish? Do you get bloated? Do you notice your mood changing depending on what you eat? Those are all clues.
That's interesting. I never really thought of it that way. It's like becoming a detective for your own body.
I love that. A food detective. Okay, so we talked about some macronutrient myths earlier, but I feel like there are so many more out there.
Yeah, for sure. Like, where do we even begin? What are some other big misconceptions people have about these things?
Well, one that comes to mind is that all fats are bad. We already talked about how that's not true, but it's worth repeating because so many people still believe it.
Yeah, I used to be terrified of fat. It's crazy how much fear there is around it when it's actually something our bodies need.
Totally. Another big one is that carbs make you fat. Again, it's not the carbs themselves, it's eating too many calories in general.
Okay, so it's not about eliminating carbs. It's about making smart choices about which carbs we're eating and how much.
Exactly. And then there's the myth that you need to eat meat to get enough protein.
Oh, that's a big one, especially with so many people going vegetarian or vegan these days.
Right. But it's totally possible to get enough protein from plants. You just have to be mindful about combining different sources.
Like beans and rice. Right. We were talking about that earlier.
Exactly. And speaking of plant-based diets, another myth is that they're always healthier than diets that include meat and dairy.
Interesting. So it's not necessarily about the label. It's more about the choices you're making within that diet.
That's a great way to put it. A vegan diet can be unhealthy if it's all processed junk food, and a diet with meat can be healthy if it's mostly whole foods.
Okay, that makes sense. I feel like we're doing a good job busting these myths.
I hope so. It's all about getting the right information out there. So now that we've talked about all this,
What are some practical tips for putting this into action?
well, one simple thing is to start reading food labels.
Oh, yeah. I've always found this kind of confusing, to be honest.
I know they can be a little intimidating, but once you get the hang of it, they're not so bad. Just focus on a few key things: the serving size, the calories per serving, and the breakdown of carbs, protein, and fat.
So basically, just being more aware of what's actually in the food we're eating.
Exactly. It's about making conscious choices. And while you're at it, take a look at the ingredient list too. The shorter and simpler, the better.
Like, if I can't pronounce half the ingredients, that's probably not a good sign.
Right. Another good tip is to plan your meals and snacks ahead of time.
Meal prep. I've heard of that, but I've always been kind of intimidated by it.
It can seem like a lot of work, but it really does make a difference. When you plan ahead, you're less likely to grab whatever is quick and easy when you're hungry.
So it's like setting yourself up for success.
Exactly. And part of that is also making sure you have healthy snacks on hand, so you're not tempted by the vending machine or that bag of chips in the pantry.
That's a good tip. I always get hungry between meals, and then I end up making bad choices.
I think we all do.
Yeah.
So having healthy snacks ready to go is key. And along those lines, another big one is to cook more meals at home.
I love to cook, so this one's easy for me. But I know for some people, it's a big hurdle.
It can be, but even just started with a few meals a week can make a difference. When you cook at home, you control the ingredients, the portion sizes, everything.
Yeah, plus it's usually way healthier than eating out. And cheaper, too.
Exactly. And it can be really fun. Don't be afraid to experiment with new recipes and flavors.
Okay, so we've got read food labels, plan meals and snacks, have healthy snacks ready, and cook more at home. Anything else?
One more. This one often gets overlooked, but it's so important. Stay hydrated.
Oh, right, water. It's easy to forget about that one.
It is, but it's crucial for so many reasons. Sometimes we think we're hungry when we're actually just thirsty, so drinking enough water can help prevent overeating. Plus, it just keeps everything running smoothly.
Okay, noted. Water is our friend. So we talked earlier about how individual needs and goals play a role in finding the right macronutrient balance. Our source material mentioned things like age, activity level, and metabolism. But are there other factors that affect our needs?
There are. It's actually pretty fascinating how many things come into play.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Okay, so let's start with activity level. If you're someone who's super active, like an athlete, you're going to need more carbs than someone who sits at a desk all day.
Makes sense, since carbs are our main source of energy.
Exactly. And on the flip side, if you're not very active, you might actually feel better with fewer carbs and more fat.
Interesting. So it's really about matching your diet to your lifestyle.
It is. And then there's age. As we get older, our metabolism slows down and we tend to lose muscle mass.
Oh, so that means we probably need to adjust our diets as we age.
We do. We might need fewer calories overall, and our protein needs might actually go up to help preserve muscle.
Wow, that's good to know. What about specific health goals, like if someone's trying to lose weight or build muscle?
Those definitely come into play too. If you're trying to lose weight, you might want to reduce your carbs a bit, and if you're trying to build muscle, you'll need more protein.
So it's like customizing your diet to match your goals.
Exactly. And we can't forget about food sensitivities and allergies.
Right. Like if you can't eat gluten or dairy, that obviously affects what you can eat.
For sure. You have to be more mindful about finding alternative sources of those nutrients.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get the picture here. It's not as simple as just following some generic macronutrient ratio. It's
No.
way more personalized than that.
You got it. It's all about figuring out what works best for you. And that takes some experimentation and paying attention to how your body responds.
This has been so helpful. I feel like I'm finally starting to understand all this macronutrient stuff.
I'm glad to hear that. That's what we're here for. Okay, so before we wrap up, I have one final thought-provoking question for our listener.
Ooh, I like thought-provoking questions. Hit me.
Our source material was mostly about the physical effects of macronutrients, but I think it's also important to consider how food makes us feel, emotionally and mentally.
Yeah, that's a good point. We don't always think about that.
Right. So I'm challenging our listener to ask themselves, how do different foods make you feel? Not just physically, but emotionally. Do they make you happy, sad, energized, tired? What's the connection there?
I love that. It's like food for thought, literally.
Exactly. And I think paying attention to those feelings can really help us make choices that nourish us on a deeper level.
Totally. It's like instead of just mindlessly eating whatever's in front of us, we're actually tuning in and being present with our food.
Exactly. And that can make a huge difference in how we feel, both physically and mentally.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about what macronutrients are, the different types, how to find the right balance for individual needs, and even how to debunk some of those pesky myths.
It's been quite the journey.
It has. But, even with all this information, I think it's important to remember that nutrition isn't about being perfect.
Oh, absolutely. It's not about restriction or deprivation.
Exactly. It's about making choices that feel good for our bodies and our minds, and being kind to ourselves along the way.
Well said. And if anyone's feeling overwhelmed or unsure about where to start, there's no shame in seeking help from a professional like a registered dietitian.
Oh, for sure. They can help you create a personalized plan that fits your lifestyle and your goals.
Exactly. They're a great resource. Okay, so to wrap things up, I think the key takeaway here is that knowledge is power when it comes to nutrition.
I totally agree. The more we understand about these macronutrients, the better choices we can make for ourselves.
Exactly. So keep learning, keep experimenting, and most importantly, enjoy the journey. Food should be something we enjoy, not stress over.
Cheers to that. Thanks for joining us on this macronutrient adventure. Until next time, stay curious.